The obsidian spire of the Vraxian Synod did not merely scrape the sky. It pierced the atmospheric envelope of the homeworld like a jagged needle intended to stitch the heavens to the earth, a monument to a civilization that had forgotten the taste of humility. Within the uppermost chamber, a hall so vast that cloud formations drifted lazily beneath the vaulted ceiling, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and ancient, polished chitin. Here, the High Archon Thykris presided over the conclave of whispers, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the cold, blue luminescence of the holographic star maps hovering above the central dais. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, the kind of silence that precedes the cracking of a planet's crust. It was the silence of judgment, and today the judgment was directed toward a singular, insignificant yellow star located in the desolate fringes of the galactic arm, a sector the ancient charts labeled only as the Null Zone. The Oltari, that cryptic race of monastic observers who dwelt in the spaces between stars, had sent a message, a single repeating transmission that had arrived 3 standard cycles ago and had been echoing through the synodal processors ever since. Thykris drummed his talons against the armrest of his command throne, the sound echoing like dry bones striking stone. He looked down at the assembled counselors, the military primarchs, and the science casters, all of whom were shifting uneasily in their ceremonial robes. The message from the Oltari was simple, devoid of their usual poetic riddles, which made it all the more unsettling. Do not go to Earth. It is a trap, that was it. No data stream, no tactical analysis, no explanation of the threat. Just the warning, delivered with the urgency of a dying scream. But the Vraxian Synod did not bow to warnings. They were the architects of the Great Ordering, the species that had brought geometry to the chaotic sprawls of the nebulae, the empire that had enslaved the very concept of entropy within their fusion forges. To be warned off a system by the passive, pacifist Oltari was an insult to their heritage, a challenge to their supremacy. Yet, the warning lingered in the mind of Thykris, a splinter of doubt he could not extract. The Oltari speak in shadows because they fear the light, declared War Marshal Vruk, his voice a grinding basso that seemed to vibrate the very floor plates of the chamber. Vruk stood at the center of the dais, his combat harness gleaming with metals harvested from a dozen conquered worlds. He gestured violently at the hologram of the Sol system. They call it a trap. I call it a horde. Our deep-range scanners have confirmed the resource density of that system. Heavy metals, rare isotopes, liquid water in abundance. It is a jewel left in the mud, and the Oltari merely wish to keep us from claiming it. They fear that with the resources of Sol, the Vraxian fleet would become unstoppable. This is not a warning, Archon. It is a strategy of denial. A murmur of assent rippled through the gathered elite. The Vraxian Empire was starving, not for food, but for energy, for the raw materials needed to fuel the expansion of the Dyson rings constructing around their own dying sun. The logic of necessity was a powerful drug, and Vruk was administering it with the skill of a master physician. But Thykris remained silent, his gaze fixed on the third planet from the yellow star, a blue marble swirling with atmospheric turbulence. The Oltari were cowards, yes, but they were not liars. In 10,000 cycles of recorded history, they had never spoken a falsehood. If they said it was a trap, there was a mechanism to the danger that Vruk's brute logic was failing to grasp. And what of the inhabitants? Thykris asked, his voice soft, sibilant, cutting through the murmurs like a laser through silk. The primitives, the humans, our probes from a century ago showed a fractured species warring over dirt-burning fossilized plants for warmth. Have they ascended? Have they unified? The science caster, a slender Vraxian with robes woven from fiber optics, stepped forward, bowing low. High Archon, the data is contradictory. The signals from Sol have ceased. For 50 cycles, the system has been silent. The radio sphere that once expanded from their world has vanished. We assumed self-destruction. A nuclear event or a biological cascade failure. It is common among level 1 civilizations. They reach for the atom before they have mastered the self. It is likely the system is a graveyard. The trap the Oltari speak of may simply be the navigational hazards of a debris field, or perhaps a lingering pathogen. A graveyard? Vruk scoffed, clenching his fist. Then we shall rob the graves. What entrapment is there in silence? If they are dead, they cannot resist. If they are alive, they are primitives who went dark to hide from the dark. Either way, they are beneath us. Archon. Fleet is fueled. The Armada is restless. We rule with pride because we fear nothing. If we turn back because of a whisper from the void, we are no longer Vraxian. We become Oltari, watchers, cowards, fading into the background radiation. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. To deny the conquest was to deny the core philosophy of the synodal way. They were the apex. They moved forward. To stop was to die. Thykris felt the weight of the crown upon his brow, a physical manifestation of the millions of years of evolution that had led to this moment. He looked at the hologram, at the silent blue world. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was an instinct, a primal alarm bell ringing in the lizard brain of his ancestry. But he pushed it down. He was High Archon. He could not govern by instinct, he governed by mandate. "Prepare the Grand Armada," Thykris commanded, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We go to Saul, we will shatter the silence, and if it is a trap, we will break the jaws of the mechanism and use the scrap to build our future." The cheer that erupted from the council was deafening, a roar of predatory anticipation. But as the holograms shifted to tactical deployments and the war marshal began barking orders to the fleet commanders, Thykris remained seated, staring into the projection of the void. He wondered if the Oltari were watching even now. He wondered if, in their monastery ships drifting in the deep dark, they were weeping for him. The journey to the null zone was not a matter of days, but of weeks within the slipstream, a tear in the fabric of reality that allowed the Vraxian ships to bypass the tyranny of light speed. The Grand Armada was a sight that would have brought lesser civilizations to their knees in worship or terror. Thousands of vessels, their hulls constructed of polarized diamond and neutronium composite, flowed through the slipstream like a river of silver fire. At the center of the formation was the Sovereign's will, a dreadnought the size of a small moon, bristling with antimatter lances and gravity well generators. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Thykris stood watching the swirl of hyperspace colors, the kaleidoscope of impossible physics that served as their road. The mood on the ship was electric. Soldiers polished their plasma rifles, dreaming of the spoils of Earth. Pilots ran simulations of atmospheric entry, betting on who would be the first to touch down on the alien soil. The arrogance was palpable. They were the Vraxians. They had conquered the triple stars of Kylos. They had subjugated the silicon mines of the Theta Reach. A single yellow star and its quiet inhabitants were nothing more than a speed bump on the road to glory. Yet as they neared the exit coordinates, the sensors began to pick up anomalies. Not ships, not weapons, just distortions. The science-caster, now stationed at the tactical pit of the bridge, looked up with a frown that wrinkled his facial plates. "Archon, the slipstream ahead. It is calm, too calm. The usual turbulence of transitioning back to real space is absent. It is as if the space-time around Saul has been smoothed." "Smoothed," Vruck grunted from his station. "Space is space. Prepare for breakout. Weapons hot, shields at maximum. If there is a trap, it will spring the moment we emerge." "Initiating transition in 5, 4, 3, the helm officer chanted. The universe snapped. The swirling colors of the slipstream vanished, replaced instantly by the stark, terrifying clarity of normal space. The Grand Armada emerged at the edge of the system, just beyond the orbit of the frozen dwarf planet Pluto. The stars here were hard and bright, distant pinpricks in a tapestry of velvet black. But it was not the stars that drew the gaze of every officer on the bridge. It was the silence. There were no orbital defense platforms, no minefields, no swarms of drone fighters buzzing to intercept. The system appeared exactly as the probes had reported a century ago, empty, quiet, serene. But as the sensors swept deeper, scanning the inner planets, the data began to return, and with it, the confusion. "Report," Thykris said, his voice tight. "No energy signatures consistent with military fleets," the science-caster said, his hands flying across the holographic interface. "But, Archon, look at the gas giants. Look at Jupiter." The main screen zoomed in on the massive planet. At first glance, it looked normal, the great red spot churning as it had for eons. But as the magnification increased, a lattice became visible. A spiderweb of shimmering, translucent threads wrapped around the entire circumference of the planet, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. It wasn't just a satellite network. It was a cage, or a harness. "They are siphoning it," the science-caster whispered, horror warring with awe in his tone. "They aren't mining the moons, they are harvesting. NG, the angular momentum of the planet itself. The energy output required to build such a structure. It exceeds our entire empire's generation capacity by a factor of 10. "Impossible," Vruck snarled. "Primitives burning fossils do not harness gas giants. It is a trick, a projection to scare us, Oltari hologram technology." "Detecting a signal," the communications officer interrupted. "It is originating from everywhere. It is not a transmission from a specific point. It is omnidirectional, audio only, standard galactic frequency. Play it, Thykris ordered. The bridge fell silent. The static hissed for a moment, and then a voice emerged. It was not the screech of a warrior or the drone of a machine. It was a human voice, male, calm, weary, and sounding distinctly bored. Unidentified fleet, you are entering a quarantined heritage zone. You are in violation of the Sol Preservation Act, Section 4. Please adjust your heading to Vector 99 Zulu and depart immediately. If you require emergency assistance, squawk 7700. Otherwise, you are trespassing. This is your only warning. Vruk laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Trespassing, they treat the Vraxian Armada like a lost freighter. This is their defense, a bureaucrat telling us to leave. Thykris did not laugh. The calmness of the voice terrified him. There was no fear in it, no panic. It was the voice of a gardener finding a stray dog in the flower bed. Scan for the source, he said. Source localized, the sensor officer said. It is a single vessel approaching from the shadow of the fourth planet, Mars. The screen shifted to show the interceptor. It was ugly. That was the only word for it. It was a block of matte gray metal, scarred and pitted with no visible engines, no sleek aerodynamic lines, no glowing weapon ports. It looked like a brick thrown through a window. It was small, perhaps only a tenth the size of the Sovereign, but it moved with a terrifying lack of inertia. One moment it was near Mars, the next it was hovering 10,000 kilometers off the bow of the Vraxian flagship. There was no acceleration curve. It simply redefined its coordinates. They are mocking us, Vruk hissed. One ship, one ugly box against the might of the Synod. Destroy it, vaporize it, and then burn Mars to glass to teach them respect. Wait, Thykris began, but the order had already been relayed. The forward antimatter lances of the Sovereign lit up, beams of pure destructive energy capable of cracking a continent focused entirely on the small gray brick. The beams lashed out, crossing the distance in a fraction of a second. The crew braced for the flash of debris, the satisfaction of annihilation. The beam struck, and nothing happened. The energy did not reflect. It did not explode. It simply stopped. The gray ship absorbed the antimatter fire like a dry sponge absorbing water. There was no flare of shields. The hull of the human ship didn't even glow. Direct hit, the weapons officer said, his voice trembling. Damage report 0, energy absorption 100%. Archon, they ate it. The voice returned over the speakers. That was rude and inefficient. You're wasting high-grade antimatter. We use that for toaster ovens. Who are you? Thykris demanded, stepping forward, his pride warring with the sinking realization that the Oltari had been right. I am High Archon Thykris of the Vraxian Synod. We are the masters of the ordered galaxy. We claim this system by right of conquest. Yeah, we got the memo. The Oltari forwarded your mail, the voice replied. I'm Captain Halloway of the terraformer-class vessel Bucket of Bolts. Look, Archon, you seem like a nice lizard guy, but you really need to turn around. My superiors are debatably ethical, but they really hate paperwork. And wiping out an invasion fleet involves a lot of forms. You are one ship, Vruk roared, pushing past Thykris to the comms panel. We are thousands. We will swarm you. We will blot out your sun with our hulls. One ship, Halloway's voice sounded amused. Oh, right, the cloak. Sorry, forgot I left that on. 1 sec. The sensor board lit up red. Every alarm on the bridge screamed simultaneously. The science-caster fell to his knees, clutching his head plates. On the main screen, the darkness of space around them began to ripple. They were not alone. They had never been alone. As the optical camouflage dropped, the Vraxian fleet realized the magnitude of their error. The empty space between the planets was not empty. It was filled with megastructures, massive, ring-shaped habitats, orbital shipyards the size of continents, and fleets of ships that dwarfed the Sovereign. These human ships were not designed for war. They were designed for construction. They were world movers, star lifters, geometric monstrosities of industrial prowess that made the Vraxian dreadnoughts look like toys. And they were all pointing their industrial mining lasers at the Vraxian fleet. We didn't go silent because we died, Halloway explained, his voice losing its boredom and gaining a hard, metallic edge. We went silent because we got busy. We stopped broadcasting because we outgrew radio. We stopped warring because we figured out how to rewrite the laws of physics, and war became redundant. This is a trick, Vruk whispered, his face pale. Holograms. Fire a kinetic volley, Thykris ordered, but his heart wasn't in it. He knew what the trap was now. The trap was the assumption of superiority. The trap was thinking that a quiet neighbor is a weak neighbor. Vruk slammed his fist onto the launch command. Thousands of relativistic missiles, solid slugs of tungsten accelerated to near-light speeds, launched from the Vraxian fleet. It was a wave of death that could scour a solar system. The human ship, the bucket of bolts, didn't fire back. It simply pulsed. A wave of gravity, precise and surgical, emanated from the gray brick. It wasn't a shield. It was a manipulation of the fabric of spacetime. The missiles didn't hit a wall. They were redirected. Their vectors were rewritten. The entire volley curved, looped around the human ship in a graceful, harmless arc and was sent hurtling back toward the Vraxian fleet, but not to hit them. The missiles were expertly threaded between the Vraxian ships, missing hulls by meters, a display of ballistic calculation so perfect it was terrifying. The missiles continued on, vanishing into the sun. "We control gravity," Holloway said. "We build stars, we disassemble planets for spare parts. You are bringing swords to a nucleophyte, Archon, and we are trying very hard not to hurt you because, frankly, you're endangered. There aren't many level 2 civilizations left. The Great Filter keeps eating them." Thykris sank into his command throne. The fire the title of his life had promised was here. It was the fire of shame. The Vraxian Synod, the rulers of the ordered galaxy, were children stumbling into a fusion reactor. "What do you want?" Thykris whispered. "We want you to listen," Holloway said. "Boarding parties are inbound. Don't shoot them. They're wearing suits that cost more than your flagship. Stand down, Archon. School is in session." The arrival of the humans on the bridge of the Sovereign was not the martial storming Vruk had prepared for. There were no armored stormtroopers kicking down doors. Instead, the airlock hissed open and 3 figures walked in. They wore white, sleek suits that seemed to flow like liquid mercury. The helmets retracted, revealing faces that were terrifyingly mundane. Soft skin, small eyes, fragile features. They looked like they would break in a stiff wind. Yet the way they moved, with absolute economy of motion, with a confidence that bordered on apathy, silenced the bridge crew. The leader, a woman with graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen the heat death of the universe, stepped forward. She didn't carry a weapon. She carried a datapad. "I am Director Kalen of the Sol Restoration Project," she said. Her voice was unamplified, yet it carried clearly in the silent bridge. "You have traveled a long way to die. We would prefer you didn't." Vruk growled, his hand inching toward his sidearm. "You mock us with your mercy. We are warriors. If we are defeated, kill us. Do not patronize us." Kalen looked at Vruk with a mixture of pity and clinical interest. "You define yourselves by conflict. We rule with pride. That's your motto, isn't it? The Oltari told us about you. They warned us you were coming. They asked us to hide, to pretend to be dead so you would pass by. They thought if you saw us, you'd try to fight us and we'd have to erase you." "Erase?" Thykris asked, the word sticking in his throat. "We don't fight wars, Archon," Kalen said, tapping her datapad. "War is an inefficient allocation of resources. If we wanted you gone, we would simply collapse the local quantum field of your fleet. You would cease to exist. No explosion, no debris, just mathematics resolving to zero. But we don't do that. We are ethical. We believe in the preservation of sapient life, even life as aggressive as yours." She gestured to the main screen. The image changed. It showed the Vraxian homeworld, but it wasn't the image from the archives. It was a live feed relayed through human sensor networks that spanned the galaxy. The Vraxian sun was dimming. The Dyson rings were incomplete. The planet was dying, the atmosphere thinning, the oceans freezing. "You came here to rob us because you are desperate," Kalen said gently. "Your star is entering its expansion phase early. Your engineers failed to stabilize the fusion reaction. You need heavy isotopes to fix it or to build ships to flee. You aren't conquerors, Archon. You are refugees pretending to be kings." The silence on the bridge was absolute. It was the silence of a secret shame being dragged into the light. Thykris bowed H. His head, it was true. The great ordering was a lie to cover their panic. They were dying, and they had come to steal life from another grave. We had no choice," Thykris whispered. "Our people will freeze," the Oltari said. "Do not go to Earth. It is a trap." "It is a trap," Kalen agreed. "But not for your bodies. For your ideology, you cannot conquer us. You cannot steal from us. But—" She paused, looking around the bridge, meeting the eyes of the terrified crew. "You can ask for help." Vruk froze. "Help from the enemy." "We are not your enemy," Kalen said. We are the janitors. We fix things. That's what humans do. We saw a universe that was messy and dangerous, and we started cleaning it up. We can stabilize your sun. We can finish your Dyson rings. We can give you the energy you need. But there is a price. Slaughter, Vruk sneered. Slavery. No, Kaelin said, her voice hard. Humility, you must dismantle your fleets. You must stop the conquests. You must join the coalition not as masters, but as students. You ruled with pride, and look where it got you. Now you must fall with fire, the fire of your old selves burning away. You have to change. That is the price of survival. Thykris looked at the screen. He saw his freezing world. He saw the impossible human fleets outside, ships that could juggle planets. He looked at Vruk, who was trembling with rage and impotence. And then he looked at Kaelin, this soft, fragile human who held the power of gods in her hands, but chose to offer a hand instead of a fist. Why, Thykris asked. Why save us? We came to kill you. Kaelin sighed, and for a moment the weight of her species seemed to press down on her. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Because the Oltari were right about one thing, she said quietly. There is something coming, something from beyond the galactic rim. We call it the Silence. It eats stars, it eats civilizations. We have been building, preparing, for 1,000 years. We turned Sol into a fortress, a factory, but we can't fight it alone. We need allies. We need warriors, you Vraxians. You are stubborn, aggressive, and brave. You are excellent fighters. We need that. But we need you to fight for life, not against it. She turned back to Thykris. The trap of Earth is that once you arrive, you never leave the same. You came as conquerors. I am offering you the chance to leave as guardians. The galaxy is about to catch fire, Archon. We need someone to hold the hose. The tension in the room broke, not with a snap, but with a slow, agonizing release. Vruk slumped against the console, his weapon forgotten. The logic was undeniable. The power gap was insurmountable. The offer was generous beyond comprehension. Thykris stood up. He unclasped the ceremonial cape from his shoulders, the symbol of his authority over the conquered worlds, and let it fall to the floor. We accept, Thykris said, his voice trembling but clear. Teach us, fix our star, and we will be your sword. The months that followed were a blur of activity that reshaped the Vraxian worldview entirely. The humans did not lie. Their engineering vessels, ships that looked like floating cathedrals of scaffolding and light, jumped to the Vraxian home system. They didn't just fix the Dyson rings, they re-engineered the star itself. They injected strange matter into the stellar core, reversing the entropy, stabilizing the burn. The ice on the Vraxian homeworld melted. The skies turned blue again. But the cultural shock was far more devastating than the physical restoration. Vraxian officers were invited to Earth, not as prisoners but as guests. They walked the streets of cities that floated in the clouds, cities that grew organically from the ground. They saw a society that had no money, no poverty, no war. They saw humans debating philosophy in parks while their automated industries churned out starships in orbit. They saw a species that had mastered the monster inside them and put it to work. Thykris spent much of his time with Ambassador Kaelin. They walked through the biodomes of Mars, watching the red dust turn green under the terraforming engines. We thought we were the apex, Thykris admitted one day, watching a group of human children playing with a gravity skiff. We thought order was imposed from above, but you have order that grows from within. It is terrifying. It's messy, Kaelin laughed. Democracy is always messy, but it adapts. That's the key, the silence, the enemy that is coming. It adapts perfectly. If we are rigid, we break. If we are fluid like us, like you are becoming, we might survive. It was during these diplomatic exchanges that the true nature of the trap was fully revealed. The Oltari, the silent watchers, finally came to the table. An Oltari vessel, a sphere of pure white ceramic, docked at the station orbiting Jupiter where the Council of Unity was being held. The Oltari rep. Representative was a being of slender limbs and large, mournful eyes. It spoke not with a voice, but with a projection of thought that resonated in the minds of everyone present. We warned you, the Oltari thought voice echoed. We warned the Vraxian Synod. We said Earth was a trap. We thought you meant a military trap, Thykris said, bowing respectfully. No, the Oltari replied. We meant a trap of destiny. We knew that if the Vraxians went to Earth, the Vraxian Empire would end. We wished to preserve your culture, your uniqueness. We feared that contact with humanity would homogenize you. Humans are overwhelming. They consume cultures not by war, but by sheer gravitational pull of their ideas. We wanted to save you from becoming them. Kaelin smiled sadly. Cultural contamination. You wanted to keep them in a zoo. We wanted to keep them pure, the Oltari corrected. but perhaps purity is stagnation. We see now that the fire has burned away the rot. The Vraxians have fallen, but they have risen as something new. The Oltari turned its gaze to the outer dark, and just in time, the echoes are here. The twist arrived not with a bang, but with a shadow. The sensors of the combined human-Vraxian fleet, now integrated and sharing data, picked up a signal from the galactic edge. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a fleet. It was a void in the stars. A patch of the galaxy was simply disappearing. Stars were blinking out, one by one, as something massive moved in front of them. "The silence," Kaelin said, her face pale. "It's earlier than we predicted." Thykris looked at the screen. He saw the encroaching darkness. A year ago, he would have despaired. A year ago, he would have tried to conquer a neighbor to hide from the fear. But now, he felt something different. He felt the hum of the human-built shield generator strapped to his chest. He felt the connection to the thousands of Vraxian ships flying in formation with the Terran dreadnoughts. He felt the strength of a brother, not a master. "The Oltari warned us not to go to Earth," Thykris said, his voice rising, broadcasting to the entire fleet. "They said it was a trap. They were right. We were trapped by friendship. We were trapped by logic. We were trapped by a better way of life. And now—" He looked at Vruk, who stood beside him, no longer a war marshal of conquest, but a commander of defense. Vruk grinned, exposing his razor-sharp teeth. "Now," Thykris continued, "we spring the trap on them." The combined fleet, a shimmering ocean of Vraxian diamond and human steel, turned its prow toward the darkness. They did not run. They did not hide. They engaged the engines. The Vraxians had ruled with pride, brittle and cold. They had fallen with fire, the fire of their own ego burning to ash. But from the ash, forged in the heat of human innovation and tempered by Vraxian courage, a new alloy had formed. As the fleet accelerated toward the dying stars, Thykris realized that the title of their history was incomplete. They ruled with pride, they fell with fire, but they would rise with light. The darkness hungered, but for the first time in the history of the cosmos, the light had teeth. "All ships," Kaelin's voice rang out calm and professional. "Pattern Delta 9, engage." "For the Ascendancy," Vruk roared. "For Earth," the humans shouted. "For the future," Thykris whispered. And the sky erupted into glorious, blinding fire.